Okay, so this evening we are going to discuss something that's very controversial and very delicate. It is the situation that Grenada finds itself currently in having to make a decision as to whether or not to allow American military assets on its soil. Now, we see that it is indeed, in some respects, a predicament for the Grenadian administration. Some describing it as being between the devil and the deep blue sea. But in times like these, it is important to look to sound reasoning and judgment and not allow our emotions to supersede our intellect. We do have numerous examples from history to look at to see when moments where we allowed our emotions to supersede our intellect and the consequences thereof. They were grave. Now we can look into the pages of history and look at advice from some of the greatest military and political strategists, and we can look to the advice of some of the greatest military and political strategists that this earth has seen. Now, one thing is clear, that the decision must be made. And I believe that Grenada cannot sit this one out. There is no cop-out on this one. Also, if we were to look and believe in the advice of great military and political strategists, one of them being Niccolo Machiavelli. He's actually one of the greatest military and political strategists of all times. And what does he say? He says that when confronted by situations that the Grenadian government is currently confronted with, it is important that one not remain neutral. In his words, it is best to be a reliable ally or an ardent enemy. That way you garner respect from both sides. If you sit it out and you pretend to be neutral, no one respects you. Neither your friend nor your foe. We've got that clear. A decision must be made, and neutrality is really not an option. Now, there's a very, very strong possibility that some sort of confrontation between Venezuela and the United States will take place, whether it be open confrontation or some sort of behind-the-scenes confrontation. More than likely, it will happen. I am sure we are all hoping that it won't. In the annals of global politics, one has to be realistic. As a matter of fact, same great military and political strategist, Niccolo Machiavelli, has said that war can never be averted. It can only be delayed to the detriment of others. His words, not mine. And we've seen that all over the globe. So the question is here, what options does Grenada have? Now, let me first and foremost make it very clear. I am not an advocate of war, and I am not advocating on anyone's behalf. But if we are to be pragmatic, realistic, the harsh truths must be told, and the situation must be analyzed in a very logical, reasonable, and critical thinking-based method. Such a critical decision should be less guided by emotion and more so by reason and logic. The first thing that needs to be done is to examine existing relationships between Grenada and Venezuela and between Grenada and the United States and look at the existing conditions, economic, social, military, and political. Now, if we examine the economic, I've said it so many times, so I need not repeat it here, but it is quite obvious that in terms of the economic, the United States have the edge on Venezuela in many respects with its relationship with Grenada. Now, let's look at the military. Again, the United States have the edge. There are established military relationships between the United States and Grenada. There's also funding and assistance in many respects being given to Grenada and the regional security system. Most of this coming from the United States. Matter of fact, the establishment of the RSS was mainly a push by the United States. So these relationships are already established. As to whether Venezuela and Grenada have those relationships, those I am unaware of, and I doubt. As for political relationships, again, I still believe that the United States have an edge. I think there are more established political connections between the United States and Grenada than there are between Venezuela and Grenada. Some may say that there might have been a recent push to try to improve the relationship between Grenada and Venezuela. But that requires some sort of time and effort. Again, even through the non-governmental organizations that emanates from the United States or emanates globally from the West, I believe that Grenada has a broader relationship with those than they would from anything that emanates from Venezuela. We can now talk about the social aspect. And I wouldn't elaborate too much on that because that one is quite obvious. The amount of interaction between the United States via travel, tourism, and so forth is exceedingly greater than there is between Caracas and Grenada. So I need not elaborate on that. I mean, the carnival, stuff like that, we can just, go on and on. So the point is well taken. So considering all these factors that we have assessed, it seems like the United States have a great advantage in terms of these factors. So now one will have to consider the scenarios. Okay? I think the scenarios to consider would be Grenada says no. And then the United States or Venezuela wins. Then there's a scenario if Grenada says yes, and the United States or Venezuela wins. I want you to understand that a win in this case may be a war of attrition. A win may be some sort of intercession. So some may say, oh, well, it's a foregone conclusion. Who's going to win and who's not going to win? But that is not the case. War is a very unpredictable and unprecise art. So no one knows the outcome. The wages of war are wisely not presumptuous and extremely careful when they're waging it. They do not underestimate their foes. Okay? So let's consider those particular scenarios now, and then we can assess those individually. Okay, let's consider the first scenario. Grenada says no. We're not going to allow military assets on island. Okay, Grenada says no. Now, the war does not proceed. Okay, for some reason, there's some sort of agreement, there's some sort of settlement. The war does not proceed. Okay, well, I believe Venezuela will be extremely grateful. I believe the United States may be disappointed and may, in some respects, reassess their relationship that they thought they had with Grenada. As to whether Venezuela or the United States has the ability to impact Grenada more significantly, I believe that the United States does, based on the factors we have just analyzed. So there's no telling what the response would be for Grenada saying no and the war not proceeding. Okay? Okay? So that is that. Now let's assume now, Grenada says no and the war proceeds. What happens? Okay? Let's assume that Venezuela wins, whatever that win shows itself as. Okay? Then I am sure Venezuela will be extremely happy, okay, that Grenada took their side and may find some way, hopefully, to reward Grenada for that benefit, okay? But the question is now, how much in its current situation, after being involved in a war, can it reward Grenada for the assistance given? Again, the United States would be in a position more clearer and properly placed to affect Grenada when it comes to that, even if Venezuela wins. Okay. And I think that would even aggravate the United States even more and would probably want to pressure, or in some respects, be a little more vengeful to Grenada. Now, I want you to understand, this is all practical stuff. This is how global politics work. So I'm being very pragmatic, very honest in terms of my assessment of the situation. So that is the scenario on the no situation. Another question to be asked is, if Grenada says no and Venezuela wins, then obviously I believe there'll be repercussions from the United States for Grenada. The question is, can Grenada afford to lose all those relationships and all those things we analyzed a while ago? It means that can Venezuela fill the vacuum if the United States decides to end those relationships that it has with Grenada? Now let us consider the yes scenario. Okay? So Grenada says yes to the United States. You can deploy military assets on island. Okay? So let's consider the first scenario. Venezuela wins. Okay? So the question is now, of course, there'll be some sort of agitation on Venezuela's part. So the question is, how much can Venezuela impact Grenada's economy and all the factors that we have discussed a while ago? Would there be severe impact now that they've won on Grenada? Would the existing relationships, whether it be economic, military, or political, impact Grenada so significantly that it would alter the economic situation of Grenada? Then obviously the significantly established relationships that America and Grenada already has, that would not change. A matter of fact, they will be maintained. And the United States may say, oh, wow, well, Grenada was indeed a friend in need. And it may, in some respects, strengthen the bond that they had. Now, let's consider the other aspect of that scenario, which is Grenada says yes again, right? And now Venezuela doesn't win, but the United States wins. Okay? The United States wins. Well, of course, we have to understand, again, the United States would be, I believe, grateful to Grenada for having offered assistance and having been a friend in need and indeed. And that in itself, I would believe that political wisdom, no one says yes for the sake of saying yes. It's quite possible there must be some friends with benefits. Okay? There must be some benefit for saying yes. It's a large risk and responsibility that Grenada would be taking on. And I think possibly the current Grenadian administration will want to weigh those risks and benefits. Okay, knowing how global politics and economics and negotiation works, I think it's quite possible, with all the prospects of oil being talked about in Grenada's waters, I believe that the United States may sweeten the pot. They say, hey, look, you guys are thinking about developing your resources, your possible oil resources. And hey, if you help me out with this, then guess what? I may help you out to develop your resources. These are some of the options that are available in terms of negotiation. So again, ultimately, it's a very difficult situation that the Grenada government finds itself in. And there, through proper advice, weighing of risk and rewards, will have to make a very difficult decision. But I trust and hope that the people around them are able to properly advise them. Now, as for the actual possibility of war, I personally hope that war can be averted. I know it's very difficult at this stage, but by some miracle or by fate or providence, that this situation can be amicably resolved. That is my hope. I think it would be the ultimate for the Caribbean and ultimate for the world. It would be a step in the right direction. Peace. Hopefully, the projection by the United States of power in the Southern Caribbean can be, in some respects, a tool. Maybe the projection of power in the Southern Caribbean is a tool that is actually forcing all the parties concerned to come to some sort of negotiation. It may be a carrot and stick approach. Let's see. Only time will tell. But again, I am sure that everybody is hoping that another war on the globe can be averted.